Hey, it's Craig with ProLike here, and today I'm going to answer a question that we get asked every now and then in the store, and that is, can you use an AT or randonnée boot in an Alpine binding? And in giving you the answer, I'm going to give you some of the details that I think you need to consider when coming up with your own answer to that question. First off, the question should accurately be asked, can you use an AT boot with a rockered lugged sole in an Alpine binding? So here I've got a Scarpa Maestrale RS with a Vibram Cayman sole, and that's a rockered sole with lugs. And some AT boots are designed to fit in Alpine bindings, and they'll be designated as such. They'll say Alpine binding compatible or ISO 5355 compatible. Other boots have an interchangeable sole where you can place a rockered lugged sole on it or an Alpine compatible sole. Let me show you on a pair of boots that I have here. These are my Alpine boots and these are my AT boots. You can see this portion of the Alpine boot has a flat piece of low friction plastic material right there that's meant to ride up against the AFD or the anti-friction device on an Alpine binding. And on a Alpine touring boot or a randonnée boot, we don't have that there. And that's one of the key differences that you need to look at. The other difference you need to look at is the height of the toe. You'll see on this AT boot, the toe is a lot higher than the toe on this Alpine boot. They have a similar shape, it's just how far off the ground this is. And you can see this is a rockered boot, whereas on the Alpine boot, it's a flat sole. So one other thing to consider is that not all AT boots use an exactly identical toe piece on them. On the Scarpa Alien, it's a much smaller toe piece than on the Scarpa Maestrale RS. It's the same height, there's just less material in this area for the toe piece of an Alpine binding to grip onto. So in answering, can an AT boot with a rockered lugged sole be used in Alpine binding? The answer we're supposed to give, and the safe answer, is no. That being said, numerous people have been doing it for years, and I've done it before. So not all AT boots are going to work in all Alpine bindings. I've got a pair of my skis here. I've got a pair of marker Griffin bindings mounted on a pair of my DPS skis. And I'll try and show this to you on camera here. What you're wanting to look at here is the AFD, or the anti-friction device. On some bindings, it's a static piece of low friction plastic, kind of similar to a Delrin plastic. On this particular binding, the anti-friction device mechanically moves side to side to help the toe of the boot rotate out of the toe piece of the binding. It just so happens that my Scarpa Maestrale RS's fit in these marker Griffin bindings. And the reason that is even though it's rockered, you can hopefully see on camera here, this lower portion of this sole, even though it extends further down, there's nothing in the binding that there's no plates or anything there that are going to get hung up on that sole. So this boot does fit in this binding, and because this binding has a mechanical anti-friction device, I do get a release on this. So it's not that a AT boot won't release in an Alpine binding. The challenge is, does it release predictably and reliably underneath all the conditions you might expect or encounter? So with a AT boot in an Alpine binding, because this sole is contacting that anti-friction device, things like temperature, dirt, moisture, and the condition of the sole, how worn that sole is, are all going to impact whether that binding releases that boot properly. So, in closing on whether you can use an AT boot with a rockered lugged sole in an Alpine binding, sure, some people do it. You'd want to find an Alpine binding that had a mechanically movable anti-friction device, or AFD, and it'd be advisable to have a toe piece where you can adjust the height of it, or in this case, find a setup where the rocker portion of the lug sole is not touching any part of the Alpine binding. People do it. It's not reliable or predictable, or as reliable or as predictable of a release as you get with an Alpine boot and an Alpine binding, and so it's not a safe thing to do, nor is it an advisable thing to do. So all of this equipment in the AT space is evolving very, very rapidly. So there are lots of new binding options from several of the manufacturers that are coming close to giving you the performance, or some would say matching the performance and the safety that you get out of an Alpine binding in terms of its ability to effectively release. If you have any questions on this or any other outdoor gear related questions, please give us a call at 406-582-0508 or send us an email to info@prolightgear.com. Thanks for watching.